Okay, so this video is going to be about the Michigan governor, Gretchen Whitmer, if I remember correctly. Okay, so personally, I think this woman's a lunatic, and I'll prove it. Because there's definitely something going on here with the fact that she's been bought and paid for by a bunch of big businesses. I think that's clear because, you can clearly tell if you dig into her history, and you probably found this video, through the same reason what I'm about to tell you. She's nothing more than just a con artist, and I mean, yeah, there's people that will say, yeah, you can't trust politicians because they lie, they're bought and paid for. But it's what a lot of people don't understand is usually most of the time when you look at like what politicians do, it's not really that bad. But, it's not right either because you could be surprised like what people try to get away with. But every once in a while there's something that you really just cannot ignore because of how stupid and cliche it really is. And for me personally, what it really came down to with Whitmer was that, and I think a lot of people that live in Michigan have to understand this, is that there's a lot of people right now that literally can't go to work right now because she's passed bills that she at this point, and basically she never really had the right outside of the government, because again, if you don't know how the United States is grant the government works, there's basically three branches of government, and every single one of them is supposed to keep everyone in balance. It's something that's unique to to the system itself. But the problem is, though, it's like, there's a lot of corruption too, because nobody keeps them in line for the most part, or maybe the paperwork takes a long time and the media tries to outsource it. Like, no, that's not going on, because the media is all bought and paid for, and basically bigger corporations that seem to have more power and influence than the politicians that run this country, for example. But the problem is, but here's where we're at right now with this whole thing. Okay, so as of right now, I've made a video talking about like how the coronavirus is not as bad as they say it is, and it isn't. There's no way you can tell me with a straight face that we should have just locked everything down because of some virus that came out in the 60s. And yeah, mutations, sure, whatever, but at the end of the day, this whole thing is just a blatant power grab because it's evident. You have a couple states, I mean, you got states all across the United States, for example, that were never on lockdown, and they didn't implement any kind of, you know, executive order. Meanwhile, over where I live, our governor's response was to basically just extend everything. And the problem with this whole thing was it never should have been like this to begin with. I know some people, once again, that are losing their jobs, filing unemployment, and they keep making it sound like, oh, it's all because of the coronavirus. Oh, it's going to take people's lives. No, the only reason it's taking people's lives is because the governor refuses to actually open things back up and just because you're going to have to at some point, and they're going to, and of course they're going to sit here and say, well, there's a new rise in cases. Well, let me tell you something, those numbers were lies to begin with. And the asymptomatic, the people that had no symptoms, there's plenty more people out there that probably had gotten sick and had gotten contagious from it, but they didn't even realize it. But again, this is like any other disease too, and it happens a lot more than you think it does, because you don't see viruses for the most part because they're small, and most of them are weak. They don't kill you like, you get immune to them, and you probably wouldn't even realize it. Your body is a great healer. You'd be surprised. And so, but here's the problem though. Okay, the when they were passing these lockdowns, the federal government basically was the one that gave them the power to do. They said, if like when Trump said, May 1st is when he said he was going to open everything back up, from what he said. So after a certain point, there were the renewals for the emergency powers and the governors, because it was basically dependent on the state. It depended on how they felt like doing it. Well, here's the problem with Whitmer. Okay, obviously she doesn't care about that because she just still goes ahead and passes legislation so she could still, go ahead and do this. But here's the problem though. She has stated that she does not care what the government has said. She went on record by saying that she got sued by a couple businesses and they overturned it. I personally think the judge himself was bought and paid for by somebody else. It's very possible. Maybe she did it. Then she turned around and she said that
they told her that the Republicans, because you need a require like you need an approval by another branch in this case of government in order to renew said executive order. In a way that you don't, as a governor, you do not have every single power under the sun. You have to get renewal from other people. The Republicans ruled that, and even the federal government stated that up until a certain point, which was probably like a month ago almost, the states have to start slowly opening back up. They will not get their renewal for their emergency powers and their stay-at-home orders. That's why you were seeing some states like after, like even Texas, for example, just opened back up. And I'll get into that in a second. But they were saying that the government was telling people that it is at this point we have to get back to work. Everything has to be opening back up. It was not as bad as they were making it sound, and we just need people to just get over this now, because that's just what's going to have to happen. But the thing that ends up happening is Whitmer comes out and says, and I'm sure there was a few other states that said the same thing, hell no, we're not going to do it. So she requested that they extend it another 28 days all the way up until May 28th. And from what I understand now, they told her no. It was supposed to be May 15th, but there's people protesting trying to abolish it ASAP because it's not needed anymore. And so what they ended up doing was you have this conflict of confusion now where basically she went ahead and did it anyways, and it's not like I haven't got a notification yet that it's been extended to the 28th, but it basically has already stated that she has in fact already done it, and she came out and said it herself. She, and she's being sued, and a lot of these. But the thing that sucks is in the meantime, while this is going on, people still can't open up because of it. And if they do, they'll be fined. Like, I don't know how much money. They'll even be stripped of their business license if they have one, like a bar or a restaurant, if they're not doing it like outside of like, deliveries, for example. Which is stupid, because this whole thing is fucking stupid. And if anybody says otherwise, you obviously have no idea what an ecosystem, like, okay, it's not really the people's fault, it's more of the governor's fault. It's basically who this is aimed at. But but that's the thing, though. People have to understand, it's we shouldn't be doing this to people. Okay, there's people losing their jobs, there's people losing their money. I'm reading more stories about how there are people going to be losing their jobs because of this. Was it worth it? Fuck no. Nobody deserves to go their whole life working for something and then they're going to come out and lie and manipulate people. Meanwhile, the governor's getting bonuses under the table to pass this legislation by big businesses, because Democrats are basically working for other, globalists and a bunch of corporations outside of the United States. Because again, why do you think a lot of businesses do businesses out of the I mean, you could argue the Republicans are the same way, but but it really depends on who you're looking at. I would say that if they're corrupted, get them out of office because they don't deserve to be there. Anybody who refuses to do their job as a governor is committing treason against their own country, at least in this case. So that's what our founding fathers stated. So, and I believe it. I do. Why should you tell people that this whole thing, you're going to try to draw a lot of pandemic and say, look, it's because there's a disease going around that we're trying to save people's lives. And then ironically, you're screwing people over by telling them they can't go to work. They'll be fined if they do, and the government's not going to give them any money. So you want their business to close, and then you end up finding out that these individuals end up losing basically everything they have because you fucked them over. So how does that make any sense? And unless there's another reason. She's lying about it's not because of the virus, it's because you're trying to push for total totalitarianism in some corrupt way in order to benefit you and whoever you're working for. There's usually other reasons to go about that. So that's what I believe. That's what I would say, because it makes sense. People lie because they want something, but they're not going to let it go. So they try to, unless you take it away from them. So they want to forcefully. It's basically like a bonus round. How far can they go, and how much can they get out of it? So so it's basically stupid. Is what it is. But it's like one of those things where like this doesn't always happen. So when it does, this is why people need to really this is something that really people should be legitimately pissed off at, because again, I've been staying at home. I've been self-employed, and this is why I was afraid that one day I might, if this is why I'm glad I have the job I do, so that way I can still be employed. I don't have to have them say, yeah, Travis, we can't have you do this anymore because the governor passed a law saying that you're not allowed to. And I would just look at him and say, well, why is she passing legislation that's unconstitutional to begin with? I mean, again, just because you got governments that think they can get away with stuff doesn't mean they should, doesn't mean they can, because what they're doing is committing treason. And rightfully so, because the media knows that they're full of shit. The only thing they really have is fear, and people give it to them, so obviously they win, sort of. But really, at the end of the day, Democrats are scared because they're going to lose the election. You know, they're going to lose. And the problem is, if you really think about it in the end, you know, like I said, reality is never as bad as people say it is. But the thing is, there's people out there that just have to go through so much stupid nonsense because of this. And I mean, if you're going to go through that much trouble to put yourself out there for the wrong reasons to the point where people are going to turn against you, possibly threaten your life, and maybe even get other people killed in the process because of your mistake, and you're punished for it last. I mean, is it worth it? No. No, it's not, because you'll just lose it all in the end anyways. There was a quote I always remembered, what good does it do somebody if they gain the world but he loses his own soul? I think it was in the book of Matthew stated that, but I mean, and I'm not really religious, but it's like I always love that quote, something like that. It says, and basically, like, you spend your whole life trying to build up towards something, but then it's like you basically just lose it because you got too greedy, you got too powerful, but you couldn't control it. What good is to be evil to someone if the people are going to turn against you because you did something to them? It's just stupid. It's just stupidity is what it is. And the fact is, they're going to sue her again, and something's going to have to be worked out, because again, you can't expect this to go on forever. Why is it that other states are opening back up, but then this one state is going to do the exact opposite because that was her response to it? And this whole thing is just it's just a power grab, but people want it to be in their power. They don't want to just give it up themselves. And so at the end of the day, if you really think about it, the governor's crazy for thinking that people are stupid enough to believe this. Because again, if you really think about it, you're supposed to be upholding the Constitution. You're not supposed to be doing what people don't tell you. Basically, you're supposed to be looking at you're supposed to be in the best interests of the people. You said you were going to fix the roads. I still see a lot of you close down constructions. You closed down the courts for a while, so that way you could get out of a few legislations. That was a pretty interesting move. You closed down. Let's see here. You closed down bars and restaurants temporarily, so that way we could slow a disease down. But how does that make any fucking difference when we live in an ecosystem and people go out anyways? You're not going to, I mean, and you even told people, like, you even told people they had to wear masks in public, but those don't work. And not only that, it's like, they were, you even told people that you weren't even going to enforce it. So why scare people like that? It's just, you're not taking your job seriously, Whitmer. And it's like, believe me, I want to respect people, but when the people themselves do things that they should be ashamed of themselves. How can you be mad at people for wanting to storm the Capitol with guns and all that, telling you to, delete this whole thing? You know what I mean? I mean, people want to just go back to work, but yet your best interest is just to screw people over. You're definitely hiding something. And this whole thing doesn't make any sense at all what that is, other than power and money. Who these people are you're working for, I couldn't tell you. But politicians are only in it to make money, but they're doing it for the wrong reasons. And yeah, there's some legislation. There's people out there that are more honest than others. They're not all corrupted and not caring. But at the end of the day, if you think about it, we need to be aware of what's going on, because what we do affects the world. Okay? Again, like I said, if you do bad things are going to happen, and people will see through it. It's just a shame that it doesn't happen immediately, though. Sometimes it just takes time.
And, I get sick of having to tell people this, but at the same time, though, I'll keep telling people it because it's true. The world is not as bad as people say it is. People try to control everything because they're trying to do it for their own, ignorance and ideologies. But at the end of the day, if you think about it, everybody's going to die. Everybody's going to, and you can't take it with you. So you might as well live your life being happy. You also might as well live your life, trying to help people out instead, because at least that's where it really matters. You know, the world is divided for the most part. It doesn't have to be. It's usually because of other people. So how about we should just do good things to help people out rather than just being selfish and arrogant and evil? Because at the end of the day, it would go a lot longer, a lot farther. Just do yourself a favor and abolish this whole thing. Put it aside. That's all people want. They just want to be able to go back to work. Okay? Forget about this whole, like, oh, we're going to extend it for as long as we can. Because it's not even, because again, the virus it's not as bad as they say it is. And even if it was about the virus, even if, this virus really did exist, how is it any different than any other illness? People get sick all the time and we tell them to stay home. We don't shut things down. It's insanity is what it is.